Okay, happy Thursday, everybody, or wherever you are in the world. It may be Friday already. So let's talk about carnivore and carnivore fasting. If you guys have been following me in social media, you know that we do a fast training week every week, and I chose this time to dabble in carnivore. And there are some pros and there are some cons, and I want to discuss them on this live because I know we've had a lot of questions, and I know that people are falling into three different camps right now. Some of you are falling into the camp of, this is amazing, I'm dropping weight, I'm not hungry, my ketones are up. Some of you are falling into the camp of, I hate this, I'm struggling, or maybe you're a vegetarian. And then the third camp tends to be the people that are very confused. So I want to try to help that third camp a little bit and sort of bring some light to this conversation. And if you're listening, let me know which camp you fall into, because I think that it's really important to understand that there's some really cool things to learn from carnivore fasting, regardless of where you are and where you sit on this subject. So first thing, I want to give you a little background on my eating style. So when I read A Diet for a New America by John Robbins back when I was 20 years old, I'm 50 now, and it was all about the treatment of animals and how cruel it was, and he was due to inherit his father's fortune. His father was the owner of Baskin and Robbins ice cream here in America. And he decided to leave his inheritance, leave what the corporate world he was supposed to step into, because he didn't like the treatment of animals and he didn't like what dairy was doing for people's heart health. And I got so invigorated and excited about what he was saying and totally in alignment with his philosophical beliefs that I decided to go vegetarian. And I did that for a decade. Over that decade, what happened to me is I gained weight, I got chronic fatigue syndrome, and I was literally sicker than I'd ever been. And one day I woke up and I thought, I need to eat meat. Like, it was like an internal thing inside of me of, I've got to eat meat. And so I chose at that point that, okay, I'm going to step in and start to eat more meat. About this time, the paleo world was coming about, and I basically went from a vegan diet to a paleo diet, which was really high in meat. And I started to drop weight, and I started to feel much better. I had better energy. I stopped crashing at 3 in the afternoon, and it was a diet that really worked for me after I left the vegan lifestyle. And then, as with many diets, I got stuck with paleo, and then I found keto. And so I started doing the ketogenic diet. And then, you guys, many of you know this story. I was doing keto for so long and so hardcore and doing lots of fasting, and then my hormones tanked. And when my hormones tanked, I then was like, okay, I need to look at diet variation. And this is where I'm living right now, is in diet variation. So diet variation to me makes so much sense, because each one of these diets actually have benefit. And we are not, you guys have heard me say this before, we are not meant to do one singular diet. We're not. We're meant to vary it. So what happens is when you make a change to a new diet, often there is an uptick. Even in the vegan lifestyle, when I went from standard American diet to vegan, when I initially made that change, I lost weight, felt great. But then when I did it only vegan for a decade, then I started to get sick. Same thing with paleo. I switched from vegan to paleo, and now, oh my gosh, now I felt better. But I did it for a decade, and then I got sick. I switched to keto. You see the pattern, and so many of us are doing that. So the first thing I come to tell you is that carnivore should be used in a variation if you resonate with this style of eating. And a lot of people have been asking me, well, how will you use this in your variation? And I'll talk about that in a moment. When I stand up on social media and I say, oh my gosh, there's all these benefits of carnivore fasting, understand that I am not in the camp of let's all go carnivore now. I'm in the camp of, this is intriguing. How do we tie this into our diet variation? If you are going to join us in our next metabolic reset, I am going to discuss it more in the next reset about how we can use carnivore fasting specifically, how we can use it for weight loss. Because this is probably, there are two areas that intrigue me the most with the carnivore diet. One is with weight loss, and the other one is with autoimmune conditions. And I want to explain myself on both of these here for a moment. One thing we know, and if you saw my post on Instagram or you're in the Resetter Collaborative, you probably know this already, but one thing that we know is that the microbiome of thin people look very different than the microbiome of obese people. And you've may or may not heard of something called a fecal transplant, but they have proven that they can take the microbiome or a poop sample of a thin person and put it into an obese person, and the obese person will lose weight without ever changing diet or exercise. So there is something about our bacteria that really is pivotal for weight loss. So I've been down a rabbit hole of trying to understand that. One of the things that I have discovered is that you need to have, if you want to lose weight, that you've got to have more bateroides, bacteria in your gut than fermacutes. If you have run a gut zoomer with us, please go pull your gut zoomer out and look. It tells you if you have more bateroides than fermacutes. So when knowing this knowledge, what I did is I started to dive into, well, what feeds fermacutes and what feeds bacteria, or bateroides. The things that feed fermacutes are twofold. One is the standard American diet. Okay, well, that makes sense. That's why so many people gain weight on the standard American diet. But the other thing that feeds fermacutes is our vegetables. And I know I love vegetables. I got an organic box of vegetables that just arrived at my front door. I'm not saying to not eat vegetables. So let me hang with me here for a moment. But they will feed more of the fermacutes. Now hang with me. The bateroides, which you need more of those than fermacutes to be able to start to drop weight, those bateroides are thrive on collagen. So you need more collagen, and the only place you're going to get collagen from is meat. Now, I know there's some powders out there that are fish collagen, so you could, if you're vegetarian and you're trying to lose weight, you might lean into that. But if you want to increase your bateroides, you're going to need to have some collagen. The other thing that will increase bateroides that I found yesterday are, and some things that are around weight loss, are the fats we've been talking about, the butters and the ghees and things like that. So we're in this dilemma, or all of us sit in a dilemma of, A, do you know your fermacutes to bateroides ratio? And if you don't, this is why a stool test is really important. So our favorite is the gut zoomer. If you just put gut zoomer in the comments, my staff will send you a link for that. So the knowing your bacteria is really important. The second step is, if you have more fermacutes than bateroides, creating a plan to flip that is what now becomes your job. And if you have more fermacutes than bateroides, and you're vegetarian, you're probably not watching this because the title of it is Carnivore Fasting, but if you're vegetarian or you're eating a lot of vegetables, you may want to use carnivore fasting as a tool to unstick you. So you would use it for a week like I'm using it, or we're using it here. I'm going 7 days. I know our fast training week is only 5 days, but the idea is to flip that. And there are other ways to flip this that we'll talk about in the metabolic reset in a couple weeks. So if you want to join us in that experience, there's a ton of education plus experience that happens in there. Just put metabolic reset in the comments and we will invite you in. So, but what I want you guys that are trying to lose weight to understand is that it's not always calories in, calories out. We've been discussing that. You've got to look at a multi-therapeutic approach to weight loss Fasting needs to be a part of that. Low carb needs to be a part of that. Low protein needs to be a part of that. And perhaps high protein needs to be a part of that. Detox needs to be a part of that. So we remember that when we come into this alternative natural lifestyle, we often bring with us this more conservative, allopathic approach, which means that there's only one thing I need to do to change my health. When you come to natural health, what I'm trying to teach you guys to think about is that your body has a certain design. And it was not meant to be obese. It was not meant to hold on to weight. So your job becomes tapping back into the you design. What does your body need? And for some of you, the fasting is great. For some of you, the keto is great. For some of you, carnivore is great. Some of you might do vegan really well. But the goal now becomes to take all these principles I'm teaching you and let's apply them and try them out and see how they do. For me this week, my blood sugar is going down, my ketones are going up. The carnivore diet is working really well. I sent in a stool sample on Monday. I will do carnivore for a week, and then I'll send in another stool sample next Monday, and we'll see what did it do to my bateroides. Very curious. So I will report back to you all once I get those research back. But I want you to think of this when I say what is the pro to carnivore, is that it could be an amazing tool for weight loss. The other thing pro is it could be an amazing tool for any autoimmune condition. And the research behind that is that meat is really high in zinc. And when you increase zinc, you start to stimulate your T regulatory cells. And your T regulatory cells calm your immune system down. Now, I posted this in my resetters this morning and it went on Instagram that you might think right now, I don't need my immune system calmed down. We're in the middle of a pandemic. But I want you to think deeper on this. The comorbidities of people that are dying from COVID are all around, like I've talked about, metabolic syndrome. They're also around autoimmunity. They're also around chronic inflammatory situations. In those comorbidities, we have one major problem, and it's called a cytokine storm. It is your T cells, your immune system is on high alert, and it is just firing. So in order to calm down that cytokine storm, you've got to have more T regulatory cells. And to have more T regulatory cells, you need more zinc. So I always prefer to get the nutrients from food first. So we've got meat that is going to help to increase your zinc, which will increase your T regulatory cells, which will balance your immune system. And we need that right now. This is why so many people are doing well with autoimmune conditions going on to the carnivore diet. So the pro is weight loss. The pro is autoimmunity. The con to me is a couple of things. The con is if you're eating toxic meat. This is, I think, best done with clean, antibiotic, hormone-free meat. If you can afford that, I think that's fabulous. I can tell you, as far as the cost goes, I've only been eating one meal a day, so I'm not eating the rest of the day. This is why we call it carnivore fasting, because you want to be able to stimulate autophagy and go at least 17 hours. So you're in autophagy over half of the day, and then you go into mTOR for growth. And you guys have been following me, hopefully know what that means. So it's great for weight loss. It's great for autoimmune conditions. But I think a con is if we decide to do this with toxic meat, if we decide to do this all the time. I do not think this is a diet that should be done all the time. I was on a interview this morning with the Women in Wellness podcast. You guys can, that interview should come out in the next couple of days. And we were talking about hormones and what this does to your hormones. And one of the docs on the call, Dr. Sonia, is a naturopath who specializes in hormones. And she was saying that in 1 week of carnivore, it will most likely not affect your hormones, that you would have to do a 90-day, she actually challenged me to do 90 days of carnivore and do a pre-Dutch test and a post-Dutch test to see what it did.
And she's vegan, right?
And she's vegan, so it was a really interesting conversation, although I have to tell you, she is vegan, and by the end of the conversation, she said to me, you have me very interested in the carnivore. So stay tuned for that, because she may be eating meats little by, pieces, days here and there. Again, variation. So I'm going to open it up for questions, but I, again, want you guys to think a little deeper and understand that I'm not standing up here saying carnivore is amazing. I am standing up here and looking at the science and experiencing it in myself and going, this is something that could be a healing tool when we need it. So give me your thoughts.
Great.
I'm sure you guys got some.
People all over the world. Ecuador in the house today.
Ecuador, awesome.
First
welcome.
That said where they're from.
Awesome.
So how do you vary between carnivore and keto? I mean, this is what we're going to explore in the reset.
Yeah, so varying between carnivore and keto. So we will explore this in our next metabolic reset. So believe me, when I get passionate about something, I can't shut up about it. So we're going to be working with everybody's metabolism there. So please join us there. But let me give you the short answer. I talk about a 5-1-1, where 5 days a week you go keto and you intermittent fast. 1 day a week you do a longer fast, 24 hours, and you do a keto meal, and then 1 day you feast. I think in that time period, that 1 day where you go a longer fast and you do a keto meal could actually be a carnivore meal. It could be a carnivore fasting day. And I like that. I'm thinking about that as a variation. The other place that I'm thinking about this is, we know that grass-fed beef will help to raise progesterone levels. So one of the problems we have with women when they are the week before their period is if they're keto or they're fasting, their blood sugar's too low and they don't make enough progesterone. So they have to kind of use foods to be able to raise their progesterone. And one of the things that those foods are like beans and potatoes that kick you out of ketosis. Well, what if you use carnivore fasting that week before your cycle to help raise progesterone so that you're getting enough progesterone to be able to have a normal cycle? You're not losing your cycle like what happens to a lot of people with keto. So again, that to me, I still have to prove on testing. So I'm actually doing a Dutch test this weekend, so I will have done the carnivore at a time when I need more progesterone. So it'll be really interesting to see, and I'll report back to you what I find on that. But that's kind of how I'm thinking about doing it. I was on some coaching calls with patients yesterday who are weight loss resistant, and so we're throwing in a couple weeks of carnivore to unstick you. So I think carnivore can be used to unstick your weight, but you would use it for a week or two, and then you would go back to keto. I'm also looking at it for people with an autoimmune condition, especially things like RA and lupus, where there's an episodic piece to it, where you're good and then all of a sudden you're not good. I'm looking at that being a solution that we would jump in with a carnivore fasting week to calm down the symptoms of autoimmunity. So that's kind of my initial thoughts. Again, when I get my microbiome test back, we'll see. So.
Somebody has a question about leukemia. You want to have any comments on leukemia?
Question about leukemia. Here's what I would tell you about
Fasting.
About all cancers, that they all tend to do really well with intermittent fasting. And the ketogenic diet was originally discovered by and used by the community that deals with epilepsy for brain health. And then the cancer community caught on to it, and they ended up using it for helping with repairing mitochondria and slowing down the progression of cancer. And we've now evolved to a place where some cancers respond well to it and others don't. And that's where my knowledge goes deficient. I'm actually going to bring Dr. Naisha Winters on. She's written a great book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. I would encourage you to get it. I'm going to bring her on just to have the discussion about which cancers do well with fasting and keto and which don't. So stay tuned on my podcast. I'll be bringing that on. So.
Okay. Lots of people talking about the positives of vegetables and how they're natural.
Yeah, so I'm not, again, I'm going to say I'm not anti-vegetable. I did not overnight become anti-vegetable. There are positives to vegetables, and I'll just, let you into some of my thoughts right now. When I start to look at the gut zoomer, what I'm seeing is that there are two parts of the weight loss equation. There's the fermacutes and the bateria ratio, but then there's also something called short chain fatty acids. And short chain fatty acids are necessary for you to lose weight. You need to have a good amount of these. They're also necessary for you to break down fat. So those of you that gain weight on keto, it can be a pathway issue for sure, like I've talked about. But is it possible that you also don't have enough short chain fatty acids? One of those short chain fatty acids is butyrate. Okay, so where do you get butyrate in? What foods? Well, in order to get butyrate into your diet, you've got, those foods are like eggs, butters, goat's milk, sheep's milk, and sauerkraut. So stay tuned on an episode that I'm going to do on that. But in order to feed butyrate and keep them alive, those are more vegetables and fruits. So I'm scratching my head going, okay, what can we do to use all of these principles and be able to grow these bacteria that help you be the weight you want to be? So that's the depth of the science I'm at right now. And I'm still coming up with some solutions for it. And again, I'll talk about that in the metabolic reset.
Okay. Let's see. Some people are getting bored on the carnivore.
Bored on the carnivore. Okay, that has to be a con. Some people are getting bored on the yes. Yes, Sequoia is pointing, he's on the other side of this camera. He's pointing at himself. He is bored. And we're only 4 days in. So agreed. Boredom. And you know what happens when you get bored? The real problem is that you'll boomerang, and we're not looking for boomeranging. I really, stay with me, you guys, as you watch my YouTubes or you're in my academy or you do one of my resets, because I want you to find your groove with this variation, because I think once you'll find your groove with the variation, you'll see that there's freedom in it. So I was really, it kind of broke my heart a little bit to see some of my resetters say, what do you mean? Vegetables are bad now? Or they were talking about like, I'm so confused. And I don't want this to be confusing. Again, I want you guys, because when people are confused, they just go, forget it. I'm just going to go do whatever. And usually the whatever is run by their taste buds, and that's toxic, usually. So what I want to do is help you create the right variation for you. And your path is different than my path, different than anybody else commenting here. And this is why we created our academy, so we could bring you in and we could have discussions on Zoom calls to help you find your path. So really, yeah, boredom is an issue, which is why a week is about all I can take, for sure. So.
Some people, we have a comment here from Tanya, and they've heard that type O does well. Type O blood.
Oh, this is great. Yeah. Okay, so Tanya wants to know, what about blood type? Okay, again, I'm going to let you behind the scenes of the conversations I've been having with other doctors this week. And that came up. What if people who do well on the carnivore diet have a certain blood type? This is very possible. And I'm, again, in research on it. So if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, subscribe, because I'm going to be doing more and more videos on these little nuances. Type O and type B tend to do really well with a high protein diet. Those types don't do well with a vegetarian diet. So my blood type is B positive. Very proud of a B positive. Maybe my blood type creates my attitude, but I tend to lean towards the B positive. But I am a B positive, and I do really well with high protein. When I was vegan, didn't do so well. Well, guess what? Blood type does really well with vegetarian is type A. So we're back at the blood type diet. I asked one of my colleagues, I'm like, whatever happened? Why do we not talk about that? And so I am going to look into this deeper and see if maybe the blood type diet has some effect to our bacteria. Does our blood type and bacteria, is there a match there? Very curious. And then how does that fit into the diet? So stay tuned. I'm very curious, but right now, with what the knowledge that I have, O and B are probably going to thrive at this the most. People with the right bacteria will probably thrive with this really well. So stay tuned.
Okay. See, people are interested in the different things you've been talking about.
It's really fascinating, right? Like, I love that you guys are interested in this.
Not sure who this is, but Global Dental Healthcare, whoever that is.
Okay.
Feels like they're not getting enough necessary nutrients and minerals by eating just
chicken,
bacon, and beef.
Global Health Dental, I think is the title of your YouTube. Yes, not getting enough nutrients. Okay, so this was my concern as well. And if you get Maria Emmerich's, if you're interested in doing the carnivore fasting on an ongoing basis, please go get Maria Emmerich's book. Listen to the podcast, the Resetter podcast that I did with her, Keto versus Carnivore, and she dives into these little nuances in our conversation. So she has a chart, we actually just put it on Instagram yesterday, that shows that there are many of the nutrients you're trying to get in vegetables, you actually get more of them in meat. So zinc is one of those, that you can get more zinc in meat. I think B vitamins on her chart, you get more B vitamins in meat. So when you say you're not getting enough nutrients, the first question I would ask is, well, how do you know? Can you feel it in your body? If you're fatigued, that might not be lack of nutrients, that could be something else. And look at that chart, because you're gonna see that you're actually getting more nutrients in the carnivore diet than you would in vegetables. Now, Ken Berry, he's got a really fast, I love this man. We're trying to get him back onto the podcast so we can discuss carnivore specifically. And he has a really interesting video out right now about poop and how his poop has changed going carnivore. And his feeling is that when you go carnivore, you're absorbing so many more nutrients that you have less poop. Well, I was just, again, talking to the Women in Wellness, and Dr. Caitlin was saying a lot of times constipation can be because you're not chewing your food enough. So I will say on day 4, I am noticing that my poop pattern, I'm having less and less and less poops. So what I'm going to do tonight is really chew my food and over the next couple of days and see if that makes a difference in my bowel movements and you know how that bowel movements tie into nutrients being absorbed. Maria Emmerich in her book has a study showing that the carnivore diet is a cure for constipation. So again, lots of different theories. I'm telling you all these little nuances not to overwhelm you, but I want to take us as a community and raise our level of thinking. I want us to get out of the dogma of one diet, and I want to raise the conversation. I want those of you that have been in my community for a while, I want to help you figure this out for yourself, and let's rise above this need to have it be one way or the other way, and let's customize it and find it for you. So those are my thoughts on nutrients.
And we have Canada and Belgium and France. I think they speak French in all those 3 countries.
Yeah,
Canada, Belgium, and
France, Belgium, and Canada. The podcast, the Resetter podcast, is quite popular in France. So we're seeing, we're in the science category and we're in health and fitness, and the community in France seems to be enjoying what we're saying. So.
Okay. Looking for more questions here. Carnivore and Libido asks a man. He's feeling.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Carnivore and Libido. Oh my gosh.
A man.
Okay, a man. I have so many thoughts on that as well. So one of the things I love about my job, if you can't tell, I love people. I love talking to people. I love having deep conversations with people. I don't like just like, let's talk about the weather. That drives me crazy. But I love talking about really deep conversations. So I brought on Susan Bratton onto the Resetter podcast to talk about sex. And one of the things that we talked about was libido. And her feeling is that the inflammatory diet is what really tanks libido. But she said it's like a Venn diagram where libido is only one piece of it. There are two other pieces. And you'll have to listen to the podcast because she says it better than me. It'll be out in a couple weeks. But libido definitely has a piece of food that might be associated with it. Now, when I think about libido, I think about testosterone. And let me tell you a little bit about testosterone. And again, I may be down a rabbit hole too far for you guys, so let me know if I am. But testosterone needs several things. It needs, for starters, DHEA. You need to have proper levels of DHEA. So one of the things that happens is that DHEA also makes cortisol. In women, it will make progesterone and it makes testosterone. So if you're under a lot of stress, what will happen is your DHEA will always prioritize cortisol. So let's go to the question on I'm eating carnivore and my libido is going down. I wonder if the change in diet could be raising cortisol. I also wonder if the meat you're eating is meat without antibiotics and growth hormone and all the junk that they put in it, if it's maybe because your meat is toxic, raising your cortisol. And so it may be that if you decide to use this as a variation, you could do a Dutch test on yourself. We do Dutch tests on men. It could be that you need to do some light DHEA supplementation. You can't really get DHEA in food. You got to get it in supplementation. So it could be a stress response for this carnivore fasting. But then there's what I learned from Susan Bratton this week was that the libido is more than just testosterone. Now, the last thing I'll say on testosterone is that there are a couple of things we know will increase testosterone. One is intermittent fasting. So really important that you're intermittent fasting. I'm preaching to the choir. I'm pretty sure here on my channel that most of you are intermittent fasting. The other thing that will raise testosterone is HIIT training. So that training where your heart rate goes up and down. So you might also try that this week and see if that raises your testosterone or raises your libido. So
okay. We're just over 30 minutes.
That was a multifaceted answer. That's okay. You can keep them coming.
We can keep going? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
And I love that you guys are thinking this through. I just want to applaud you on that because that's what I'm trying to teach you how to do is think for yourself. So one of the things that just irritates me with healthcare right now is we just take the opinion of our doctor or our politician and we don't think it through for ourselves. And I really want you guys to rise above that. I want you to think for yourself, which means you might not agree with everything I'm saying. I'm telling you what I find, what I'm experiencing, the clinical trials I'm doing, and the science behind it, and then I'm asking you to make the decision for yourself.
Okay. I think you answered this question, but Sheila's asking again. I think they asked the question earlier. The variation between carnivore and keto in the same week. So Sheila's asking variation between carnivore and keto in the same week. So I answered that earlier. I think the most simple version of that is a 5-1-1, 5 days of keto with intermittent fasting, 1 day of carnivore fasting, and then 1 day of feasting. That's kind of where I'm seeing the new trend. And you advocate intermittent
fasting. If you've been doing keto a long time, I think you might even go a week of carnivore fasting and then back to keto. And remember that carnivore is a version of keto because you're not eating any grains. So it is keto. It's just you're megadosing on protein.
It's a subset of keto.
Yeah, it's a subset of keto. My ketones this morning, like last night, my ketones were at 2.4. I woke up at 1.2. So I am definitely getting into ketosis pretty quickly. So awesome.
We don't have a lot more questions.
You guys, thank you again for engaging in this conversation with me. I love your opinions. If you want to understand this more how it relates to metabolism, please join us in our Metabolic Reset. If you want to understand your gut profile, get a gut zoomer and let's see what's going on with that bateroides and fermacutes. So it's fascinating, and it all boils down to you're a miracle. You're born in a miracle. Don't ever forget that. So if you come up against a wall of healing, no matter what the topic is, that there's some new piece that you're supposed to introduce in. And carnivore fasting may be the thing. So Go also to the Resetter podcast and listen to the interview I did with Allie Miller around anxiety, because you'll see in that interview that she uses meat to be able to calm the brain down. So there's a whole piece on that. And tomorrow I'm putting out a video on the 5 conditions that I think will be absolutely helped with carnivore, that I feel like you should step out of keto and go into carnivore with these 5 conditions. So that'll be on tomorrow. So, okay, mwah, hugs, love you all. Thanks for your amazing comments, and keep believing in yourself. You're doing an awesome job.